So welcome everybody. My name is Cherise Mark and I'm a remote care specialist at Medell headquarters in Austria. And today I have the pleasure of presenting telemedicine and cochlear implants. So I have been working at Medell for the last 5 years, developing aftercare strategy for the company. But in total, I have been researching telemedicine for the last 8 years. So today, what I wanted to present was some fundamental facts and considerations if you intend to start a strategy of your own. I chose to center around this instead of all the fancy new developments because I think we sometimes forget what is important for a good foundation, because for your strategy to work, you need it to be sustainable, and without sustainability, it doesn't make any sense. So what is the goal? We all have the very same goal. Our goal is to do as much as we can so people with hearing loss can live fulfilled and integrated lives. We want to ensure that they have the best care and services available. So we all have our role to play in the aftercare of these patients. We have different abilities, we have different education, but we all contribute to this particular patient. It's a great investment. However, despite what we might want to achieve, there are other things that have an external role that we cannot control. So it is my recommendation that telemedicine can remedy some of these external factors, and we will go ahead and try to discover what they are, and I try to explain their importance. Okay, so what is telemedicine? Telemedicine, defined by the American Telemedicine Association, is the remote delivery of healthcare services and clinical information using telecommunications technology. This includes a wide array of clinical services using internet, wireless, satellite, and telephone media. So, telemedicine is not a very new thing. It might be new to some of you. Some of you might have heard it in some presentations at conferences, or you might have read it in the literature, but telemedicine has existed for a long time. For example, if you go for an x-ray and your x-ray tech takes a lung x-ray, for example, and then sent it by fax to the radiologist, this is a form of telemedicine. You're connecting the patient, their data, to an expert. And this method is called store and forward. So you gather the information and you send it at a later date using a medium. You also have, for example, a cardiac patient with a heart monitor, so a pacemaker. They are continuously sending information in real time. So this is another form of sending information. So you have real-time information continuously being sent to a professional and monitored for any inconsistencies. So here you have an idea of what telemedicine can do. So how does that relate to us for CI users and in terms of audiology? So let's have a look at the typical career of a CI user. I think it's important for us to get some perspective. So let's take a pediatric patient, for example. So here we have a timeline, a general timeline for this pediatric patient. So if we look here at the very left, when your child is born, if there is a universal hearing screening program, your child will have an acoustic emission test, and if they fail that test, they will be monitored again for this ABR when they are about 3 months old. If your child is again unsuccessful, then they possibly may have profound hearing loss and will have to go through the candidacy for a CI implant. If your child is successful for candidacy, the ENT doctor would schedule a surgery for your child. And post-surgery and switch on is a few weeks after, but this area here is different from this part of the timeline, differs from facility to facility, from every clinic. So your first fitting is about 4 weeks post-surgery. And then you have follow-up fittings once every week for 6 months. and then once every 3 to 6 months thereafter in this area here. As you can see, there's an overlap of rehabilitation sessions because this is also important that the child understands what's happening along with their fitting sessions. As you see on the left, we call this the pre-op phase, and on the right, this is the post-op phase or aftercare phase. Here at Medell, we call this remote care. So our concentration is really in this aftercare phase. We see this as being important for a CI user to have the best use of their implant. And on this side, this pre-op phase, we have not really paid attention to this because this is really the responsibility or might be better handled by the doctor and the clinic because they have more access to the patient at that point. So our responsibility and our focus is here on aftercare service. So what is remote care? As I just mentioned, this is how Medell chooses to call their telemedicine approach for aftercare. And never mind my rudimentary umbrella, but what I wanted to say is that for us, we have 4 key elements. So we have remote fitting, remote rehabilitation, remote consultation, and training. So for the purposes of this presentation, I'm going to just extract remote fitting and go into greater detail as to how telemedicine works here, and also touch on remote consultation and training, as this is really, really important for the sustainability of your strategy. We have to remember that usually patient and expert usually see each other face to face. This is the modality that they know, this is what they are trained with. And here we are trying to introduce a medium in between. And as simple as that might sound, this is really not that easy. So people do need training. They need to be trained on how to now interact with this medium. And this is really important. Then we also have remote consultation. So now we have the ability to interact with sessions and have a better, smoother flow of what's going on. Not that professionals can't do their job. It's just that we can now, real time integrate with them and have better session outcomes. So let's continue. So this is our current remote fitting solution here at Medell. It's very simplistic, but very effective. So here are some of the key requirements. We have 2 standard computers. We need a webcam, a headset. We also need a hosted web service. So we have tested WebEx, GoToMeetings, TeamViewer, Link, and Skype for Business. And we have seen that also you need an internet connection more than 128 kilobits per second. It will work, but it's going to be very slow. Let me explain what we have here. So for this remote fitting solution, we have the remote expert on site in front of his computer. And then on the other side, we have the local facility or satellite center with the CI user, the host or e-helper, webcam, Maxbox, and also we have, in addition, the alternative audio communication line, otherwise known as a telephone. And we also, as a feature of these hosted web services, you could also instantly message each other. So how this works is the remote experts would reply to an invitation to a session. And the e-helper or host will start such sessions, hook the patient devices up to the Maxbox and start the Maestro software. The remote expert will then take control of the local facility computer and start the session. When the session is over, then the remote expert will exit the meeting and the e-helper will give the patient back its devices. We have tested this. It does work. It's very simple and effective. So I would recommend using this for remote fitting. So why remote care? Why bother? Let's again look at CI users. It is possibly used for some patients for less traveling. not everybody lives in the city, not everybody has close access to their speech pathologist, their audiologist, their ENT doctor. It's not possible for everybody to live within the same vicinity. So some people might have to travel long distances, spend money. If it's a pediatric patient, it's probably 2 parents or 1 parent, they have to miss work. So that's a lot of time lost and money. What else is good for the CI users? Making best aftercare available to everyone. So as we talked about before, it's difficult with so many variables to have equitable care. So remote care can be a remedy for this, assuring almost the same audiological level for every CI user. This is important. Providing regular aftercare in large areas with low population density. So geography is a factor, again, cannot be said enough. Providing regular aftercare in emerging markets. So what you would see in emerging markets, you may have 1 or 2 or very few CI users, but it's unethical to have people that have your product and they have no access to care. So it's like giving someone a car, not giving them any gas to drive it or any maintenance. So they don't get the full use out of this very expensive device. So I think having remote care is important, especially for this group of customer. Also for the CI user, it could be a quick troubleshooting tool. Instead of scheduling an appointment for something that could be easily fixed, remote care is a good example. So you could easily go ask your specialist, okay, what's wrong, this is this, and it could possibly be something not really difficult, but something with the hardware. So you save a trip, you save some money, you save some time. Supporting local audiologists and rehab specialists. Some CI users like to stick to who they know. They don't like to be with other people, other experts, even if they're in the vicinity. So they like to support who they know, what they know. So they're already not being in front, face-to-face with their specialist, but they don't want to change to anyone else. So this is a good way to reinforce this relationship. Service and care is the next generation of a business for Medel. Yep, CI users need to be cared for, but it's also a benefit for us at Medel. I think not only do we produce devices, but in future, an added value is service and care to our customer. And I think this is of great importance. And using technology to assist in care. CI users are no longer just baby boomers or people who are like in their late 80s. We have implantees who are teenagers, and they use a lot of technology. So not using technology would be a fault. So I think it's important for us to use technology to assist in care. Why remote care for a clinic or hospital? As we already discussed, we have more and more CI surgeries as cochlear implant is getting more and more accepted. They are being paid for by insurances, and children are having more and more the ability to have access to an implant. So that means more workload. So getting partly rid of the audiological workload. We do not want to get rid of audiologists. This is not what we're trying to say. We never want to get rid of the expertise of an audiologist, but just take some of the workload off of them. So for example, if you have patients that can be reached remotely, you don't have to go to a clinic, for example, and schedule your entire day just on a Wednesday, for example, but you could see patients frequently throughout the week. So you save some time in traveling. Again, can't emphasize that, and this is really important. So maybe you could see more patients in a shorter space of time. Increase the number of CI patient surgeries. So if you have already the infrastructure set up, you have a plan set up for telemedicine, you could increase the surgeries because you have enough resources to take care of the aftercare. And this is also a way to provide lifelong service. As we said, this is a cradle to grave endeavor. Let's touch again on what are the advantages for Medel. we just provide better service. I can't emphasize that more. And one of the things that's important with this aftercare is compliance. If you have patients who live far away, or they have really young kids, or they have kids with disabilities, or they're very stressed out and they miss appointments, this is never good. So it's our hope that having remote care and this telemedicine strategy will increase compliance and then result in better outcomes. We think it's an easy tool to move into emerging markets and just to be present without costly infrastructure. So it would be a shame not to move into a country where they desperately need our product, but they don't have the infrastructure or the expertise to maintain this implant. And that's a shame. Because people are not always separated just by geography. They don't have access just by geography, but they don't have access based on having people that can help them. They don't have audiologists or well-trained audiologists or enough trained audiologists, and this is also a factor that affects them having access. And of course, it's added value to the patient. So in an emerging market, this would be very, very necessary, but maybe in a developed country, it might just be for convenience. So you see the difference in necessity, difference in need, and just how medicine, it can be not equitable. So our hope is with telemedicine is to make our service delivery more equitable and it's more flexible depending on where it is used. So again, our current remote fitting solution, it is flexible and easy. It uses off-the-shelf components. Of course, you could upgrade it if you want to something really, really expensive, but we wanted to use the very basic as a proof of concept and for feasibility, because again, any strategy needs to be sustainable and repeatable. If it cannot be repeatable, then it makes no sense. So we were of the opinion, if we take off-the-shelf components to start with, that this could be easily implemented. It's everywhere applicable and safe and reliable. Some of the disadvantages though, you can't do it from home. So no matter how we try, well, to date, you cannot be at home and have your fitting done or have that interaction. You always need a second person, as you see here, as we saw in the diagram. There's no proprietary software or hardware. We still need this hosted web service. And this is a lot of moving parts that we are not responsible for. And this is really difficult to handle because, for example, if you're in a country like Nepal, you might not have electricity all the time. So these are very basic things that we need to consider that's often left out, which I try to let people know, which is really important when you are designing a solution. They also may not have internet all the time. So you really have to tailor your solution to your area. So let's talk about some of the general challenges. So despite the fact that I said remote care is simple, the setup is simple, it seems like a one-shot deal. But there are external factors that really would hamper your strategy. So let's look at health law. For example, does the country have health laws that allow telehealth, that allow telemedicine practice? If not explicitly written, can it be interpreted as such? This is something that you would have to really define, and if you're not sure, you should hire a lawyer to really iron that out. Also, in some countries, each region is responsible for the people in that region. Example, like in Italy. So you have to really be aware of where you're going to have this strategy in a clinic, private practice. What does that mean? Let's move on to licenses and credentials. For example, in the US, as a professional, you get your license and credentials from a particular board. But sometimes you need to be licensed in a particular state, and you're only allowed to practice in the state. So there's already a problem for telemedicine. You would have to somehow try to, link patients within that state. But they're moving towards having facilities that would use other professionals from other states as a proxy. So we're making progress because it really does hinder any telemedicine execution. Another thing is costing. You have to be really careful about the resources that you put in to your telemedicine approach. It seems really easy, but you still have to pay like the extra helper. You have to make sure that all the machines are being maintained. So you really have to, the internet, you really have to be careful about what is going in and all the fixed costs attached to it. So costing is important. You have to pay attention. Another thing is the connectivity. Like I said before, for example, in Nepal, if you set up a strategy there, it makes the most sense. Those people may possibly need to have access desperately because, for example, most clinics will be in Kathmandu. And take, for example, if you have a patient in Nala, then that's a good ways away, a long bus trip. And you really want to ensure that you have a good wireless connectivity, but sometimes this is not always possible. Sometimes they don't have electricity the entire day. So something as simple as that could really hinder your project. So you really have to pay attention to where you're at and what are the conditions of this country and the people that live there. Culture might also play an integral part in the delivery of your strategy, things that you would take for granted. So you have to be really on the ground, understanding where you're putting this telemedicine solution. Another thing is infrastructure. So again, 2 computers, simple enough, internet hosted web services. But what are the other things attached to that? You need to have a scheduling system. You need to schedule your patients well. You need to have good information and database. I think this is necessary if you really want to sustain your telemedicine project. And also you need proper protocols. So you need these things in place. Another thing is data security, privacy, and storage. So what are you going to save? How long are you going to save it? Who are you going to share it with? And these are things that are really important. So in a feasibility stage, you might not really think about it, but if you want something that's sustainable, and this is lifelong, that data needs to be somewhere. And at some point, the patient might want to have access to that. You never know. So you need to have it. And who owns it? It gets really complicated. So you have to figure this all out. Another thing that might be a little bit frustrating is engaging people, so buy-in. So what I have discovered, as simple as this strategy might be, you might have issues with buy-in, convincing people that this is something that is valuable to them. It might look like a good thing to have, but they're not really sold on the benefits of it. So what you should do is gather evidence. People like to have evidence-based to come to a good conclusion as to what they would want and if they would want to integrate it. So here at Medell, we have done a couple of studies to show a proof of concept to help us to promote telemedicine and to have some buy-in. So engaging people might be difficult. Also engaging patients to change from their face-to-face to a telemedicine approach. This might be one of your stumbling blocks. And then creating a business model. This it can also be difficult. And having it sustainable is because it will always be changing, and you have to be really diligent with changing laws, reimbursement, and so on. And the very last bit that is the crux of the whole thing is reimbursement. Reimbursement is really, really important. Follow the money. What we have discovered is getting telemedicine services reimbursed can be difficult, again, depending on which market you're in and which country. If you have a market that is out of pocket, then you're okay. But if you're in another market, you have to get things approved. And getting your telemedicine solution approved might seem difficult. But I just wanted to emphasize from the list that I have, it's not limited to this, but these are some of the key things that I think is important for you to consider. Some of you might not agree with me, but this is okay. You can always find other things and read the literature, but this is what I thought was most important. And what do you think is the future? So what I see happening is patients are changing in their behavior. So what we have are patients that are more knowledgeable and they want more autonomy. So how do we facilitate that? So I think there'll be more apps available. I think the direction would be to produce more apps so patients feel like they play a major role in their care. Of course, we don't eliminate the professionals, but to a limit where they can do some minor things on their own. Another thing that I think will happen is comprehensive integrated service platforms. I think this is also something that would emerge where patients go to one place to get everything done, to see their mapping, to interact with the audiologist, to make appointments. So it would look more like a multi-stakeholder platform. I think this is the future, and this is, I think, the direction that we're heading. Another thing would be bundling of services. So I think, for example, if you have apps that patients want to buy, then you could just bundle these services together. They want to spend their money on these things and they do get care. So this could be another approach in future. Also, a lot of people use social networking, and that could also be useful for remote care. So instead of pushing, just having data go between the audiologist and the CAI user, we also could get other information from social media. Instead of just pushing information, we could also get information back as to our customers' behavior. They might not talk to us or their professional, but they might talk to each other. So this is a good way to see exactly how well our product and our solution is really out there in the real world. So I think this is a really important aspect moving forward. And one thing I need to emphasize is always remember the CAI user. I think as a researcher and working in a medical device company, we no longer could do, build it and they would come. I think it's important to realize who your CAI users are, understand their needs, their wants, listen to them. They might not know how to get there, but they know what they would like to have. And I think it's really important because what we think is important, like all the very nitty-gritty technical details, might not be as important as something that seems very frivolous for us, but really important to them. Because, for example, you have your implants that go for like teenage children. They're in little kids. They're, again, cradle to grave. So what is important at one stage might not be important somewhere else. So you need to really understand your market and really pay attention to the user, have focus groups, look on social media, really interact with them and let them really feel like they have a part to play in their care. So that ends our presentation. Thank you for joining me. I hope that you learned a lot. If any of you have any questions, you could definitely contact me at Medell headquarters. If you have anything to discuss, anything to add, I would be happy to answer any questions. Again, my name is Cherise Mark, and thank you for joining me.